senses of autumn. One thing that fascinated me in your book was the stacking of the tomatoes.
Right.
And you have to tell us about that and what a skill that was.
It was a real art form, Marlene. There were various aspects of it. The ones on the ground that were very good at it, you see, initially they would put tomatoes directly on the wagon rack, and then the people on the wagon would build the load. The good ones, you might be up 4, 5, 6 tiers. They would take baskets, and mind you, they're filled over the crown, and they just flip them up, straight up, just straight up. The people on the wagon would just catch them and slide them over. It was effortless, and rarely would a tomato drop. They were extremely skilled at it, and we're talking throwing the baskets up maybe, you know, 10 or 11 feet up in the air. And the people on the wagon, you have to bear in mind that the roadways weren't very level. Usually they were rutted from...
especially if there was rain.
Yeah, that's right. Traveling through them, and prior loads would cut tracks. So you were always tipping and bobbing and rocking. And the good ones on the wagon, I think they cushioned with their knees, but they would go with the flow. It wouldn't throw them off much at all, and they'd slide the baskets over and place them, and generally just so. And there's a picture in the book of a load of tomatoes built on the Chauvin farm that shows their skill. It's I would describe it as a perfectly built load of tomatoes. And the loaders, there was a cultural aspect with that as well. They spoke a different language. Every whistle and grunt and something else meant something, and everyone understood it. Yeah, and it was like, it was almost just a grunt, and they knew what to do different. And you'd also see it at Stokely, at the canning company, Stokely's or others, when they were unloading tomatoes. They could take the baskets and throw them even from a distance so that they'd tip over just as the person would catch the basket, and really they would never catch the weight of a full basket of tomatoes. They would just catch empty baskets, the tomatoes falling out. It was a real skill, and invariably the ones on the ground were some of them were big, strong people. Some of them were not so tall. But when you were good at it, generally that was your job, because they really knew how to do it. And the ones who were skilled at building loads of tomatoes, generally they rode the wagon. There wasn't a lot of interchange unless it was necessary to do so. I remember one time at our farm we had a gentleman pull in who had worked in the tomato fields before I could remember. And he was a gentleman in his late 80s, and he was still driving his car. He came in from Arizona, and he was still strong and spry. And he wanted to get back out into the tomato field, and we had the wagon going between 2 rows of tomatoes. One was very thin, and the other one was extremely heavy. And he wanted the heavy side, and he's just throwing them up there like you can't believe.
And he was 80?
And he was in his late 80s.
Late 80s.
Yeah, and the people came from the other side to help him out, and he was quite upset by it. He sent them back to their side. He was just in his glory. It was a remarkable exhibition of hardiness and strength, but also he came alive doing it. It was magical to see these people work. I used to love loading tomatoes. I'm not saying that I was good as some of the people I describe in my book, but the ones that were really good at it, they were tremendously skilled.
Our friends at Trophies Plus in Essex have done a mug for you. This makes you an official storyteller, and it has your name and the date you were here.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Marlene. It's wonderful.
Enjoy that?
I'll treasure it. Absolutely. Thank you very much. It's been a privilege to be here, Marlene.
Joe, where can we purchase your book?
Well, if you call the law office in Essex at 776-7349, Darlene will get you a copy. It will be in bookstores soon. It's not there yet. There are a few other locations, the Daily Grind in Essex and elsewhere. Or there's an email address, j.byrne@bellnet.ca. And
okay, we'll make sure we have that for our viewers at the end so that they can write that down.
Okay, thank you. And but we expect we'll be in the bookstores soon. We had anticipated the end of September for that, but we've pulled the schedule forward.
I'm sure people will enjoy reading The Senses of Autumn. And also, Joe has written some poetry in the back of his book, and that's we're going to conclude the show tonight. Thank you once again for watching The Storyteller, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
They led me to that room where you were marooned, and I saw you look out from beneath those tubes, so pale and peaked and gray. It was as though your whole spirit lifted from the bed, and you glowed. You shook because it was me. And I kissed your cheek and hugged you and remembered your parties in the Detroit we called Lithuania, across the Ambassador Bridge, among people with whom I did not belong, like Smetona the president and Plakavicius the general, who drank straight whiskey by the tall glassful and never teetered, and Belanda with her Napoleon cakes I still dream of, so creamy and fluffy and grand, and you, Maria, the poet whom they all honored. It was you who bought me my first bike and my first pair of skates. You never once gave me heck, and you always made me feel like a big guy. I felt invincible when you were there. I thought I could even fly. I showed you that I could run faster than I could down the stairs, and I crashed my head. You at once left all of your important guests. You held my hand in the hospital, and you kissed my cheek, and you hugged me. You held my hand and cared for me, just as you cared for Mr. Sims when he was marooned. It was when I was most ill that I saw you give my grandma a big hug, whom I never met, and you stayed with me when I was a little boy.